let's go live to the Newsreel Theater inside of the Cincinnati Union Terminal.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is David Zeman, and I'm from Arlington Heights, Illinois, not far outside of wonderful, beautiful Chicago. Thank you to the Cincinnati Railroad Club for having me. And thanks to those in the audience, in person and virtually, viewing the recording later. I'm going to be talking about my train photography at night. So when the sun goes down, I see darkness as an opportunity, a blank canvas almost for a photographer to mix existing light with artificial light for scenes if they so choose. I don't see any right or wrong way to execute a night photo. Everyone has their own style or series of styles depending on their inspirations. What I found in preparation for this show is if you stringline my night shots in chronological order, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense insofar as how the progression and change of my strategy moved along over the years. There was a lot of one step forward, two steps back, and I'm still trying stuff and being inspired by others every day. This will make more sense once we go through the show. The show is divided into 4 separate sections related to different themes that I have explored within night photography of trains. Each section will try to end up with the best or most advanced examples from each theme, not necessarily in chronological order. Again, this will make more sense as we move along through the show. The first of the 4 sections is what I call spontaneous rail fanning with flashes. So we're going to start at the beginning of my night photography journey here. This was one of the first I did, and this is the Pier Marquette 1225 in Alma, Michigan. One of the first I did where I had collected 4 speed lights and was using remote triggers to fire them in sync with the camera. Before this, I only had 2 speed lights, which nobody wants to see my pictures with only 2 because, oh boy. And I learned and saw early on the night shots, the night stuff takes a lot of experimenting, a lot of trial and error, lots of failed attempts, lots of, this didn't work out. One thing that's key to understand from the get-go and appreciate, hopefully, if you're not familiar with how this works, when you're using speed lights synced to the camera, you only have one shot, basically. The recharge time on the strobes is not very quick. So you basically only have one shot, and you have to time it right. Between the last image and this image, there were a lot of mediocre attempts with minimal true guidance from others as to how you really should set things up so it looks okay. I was watching some somewhat talented contemporary photographers on social media, but had not yet been inspired by some of the big names that we all know. I was still over a year at this point from even knowing who Winston Link or Jim Boyd were. The more you practice, the neater the lighting becomes. I found early on that height of the strobes, the spacing, making sure test shots, all those things pay off. Patience and looking at things and figuring out how you make things neater. Early on, the focus was simple. It was lighting a subject in a scene as evenly and cleanly as possible. And really the focus had not yet shifted to become artistic or explore new strategies. We'll get into more of that later. When particularly rare railfan events happened, I wanted to make sure I was there with enough time to set up and make sure everything was working. Lots of test shots, which is a positive of digital. Link and Jim Boy didn't have that available, so I'm lucky. Extremely important to have extra batteries for your strobes, for your triggers, making sure you know your camera inside and out. One of the biggest things that people struggle with, and I struggled with at first, is how do you focus your camera at night? It takes a little bit of skill, or trying different things and learning from others. How you set up for a moving train with headlights becoming a factor. And then that flash isn't long enough and focus isn't quick enough to lock onto the subject while that flash is going off. I was taught and inspired, early. I sort of figured out you should avoid just open spaces, bland locations, open fields, grade crossings with not much going on. It was okay to document the train, but you really need a scene in order to make it worth it. So you want structures, signals, scenery, any other point of interest. And another thing I'll point out is that timing for these shots with the one shot in mind is extremely important. I tried a couple of things. Sometimes I put my camera on a tripod and I don't look through the viewfinder of the camera. I'll look above the camera when it's on the tripod and choose in the scene with my own two eyes where I want it to be when I hit that shutter button. And it works out a little bit better. So this is my hometown, and Union Pacific does not have many of these Cotton Belt or Southern Pacific painted locomotives kicking around anymore. So this was right about midnight one night a few years ago. And as you just saw, we just went kind of ahead a whole bunch of years. And up until this point in time, my philosophy had not changed much. The setup was very fundamentally basic. Like I said before, throw light at the scene, make sure we're adequately lighting the train and the depot next to it or whatever the other subject is. Basically 2023, year and a half ago, that whole year, I started paying much closer attention to lighting strategy by more renowned photographers, both rail fans and not rail fans. I started watching videos about studio lighting and how guys light cars and other subjects and stuff like that. With the one shot in mind, I also had not really worked up the guts to try and be more creative or artsy for a train that was coming. Maybe it was rare, a special event. I didn't want to miss the train or blow the shot because I was trying to do something super extra. It was later on, and around this time, I gained a couple of solid mentors and was noticing things about photography that I liked and wanted to integrate into my photography. Those mentors and inspirations were much more skilled, seasoned photographers. Additionally, one of those things that was explained that would help up the game, expose some detail, is using some backlighting. So this is East Broad Top number 16. And what you can see here is a lot of the detail a bit more clearly. Why? Because I backlit it. So rather than pointing the light 90 degrees at the subject, I kind of bounced it off the side from an angle to the rear so that it created shadows with the detail. If you want to expose detail, backlight it. If you want to add drama, backlight it. This is one of This is the first of many shots within the presentation that incorporates not only the train, but the men and women who operate them. And this gentleman was kind enough to pose in front of number 16. Getting personnel incorporated in the pictures is not as easy nowadays, especially unless it's a coordinated photo shoot event, which we'll talk about later on. I would say this is one of my best examples of that backlighting thing, getting light off the side and showing off all the detail. I think the way that the smokestack, or the smoke out of the stack, was lit up, and the light across the cars, and you can see all the running gear, and across the nose. In this shot, I have a light on the other side of the tracks, so that helps to expose some detail. It's not just a washed out steam engine, which if you just throw a lot of light at it, that's sometimes what you end up with. And maybe this all sounds super advanced or beyond the scope of the Railfan thing, but I'm a believer in that if you take some extra steps to make stuff look different or better, it really does look better. There are times when it's better to just outrightly be simple. 1, 2 lights. A studio photographer or somebody with a different background in this case would probably say that I used a key light. It illuminates the depot and the train, the lead locomotive, and leaves a lot of darkness. Darkness is just as important in a night photo as the light. And throwing a bunch of light at a scene, having everything on the ground bright, but a dark sky does not count. We've all seen this picture in the social media pitch and the chat earlier. In this specific scene, we had the fog helping, which closed the visibility by quite a bit. It helped enclose the scene with the depot and the train. And as you can see, behind the second locomotive, there's a light source that I added. And if it weren't for that source of light, this image would not be the same. It adds some sort of level of drama or ambiguity. Is something there. I raked the light across the nose of the locomotive, went somewhat soft on the side, but helped the depot. You can definitely see what's going on in the truck detail and some of the other things because I lit it that way. This is the first of many pictures from the Illinois Railway Museum in this presentation. And this is Frisco number 1630, 210 Russian decapod, shoving west on the main line with a railway post office catch a fraction of a second from happening. That's the Railway Museum's 1914 ACF built bag and railway post office car, number 1923 of the CB&Q. For this one, I did a little bit of backlighting. I probably could have added a little more to show some more detail, but the train was moving. This was not a shot where the train was stopped. The train was moving. So I think this was one of those where I had the camera on the tripod and was looking with my eyes above the viewfinder for a little bit better visibility. And I had told myself exactly when I wanted to fire the camera, which was an instant before that mail hook grabbed that mail bag. Obviously, we've gone back in time a little bit now. We're in 21. By September of 21, I was a volunteer at IRM for a little bit and had helped photograph several events for the museum. I made a bunch of new friends, and some of them turned out to be some of my best friends in the whole world, really long-lasting, strong relationships. On the left is my good friend Matt, a former coworker. And on the right is my good friend Logan, who is a mechanic on the steam trains at Disney. So now we're at the point in the show where in this order of operations in my head that we're gonna segue from me being trackside with a handful of lights. They go off when the train comes through when I want them. I sort of know how to use them. Then I'm sort of figuring out the artistic thing. And then we're going to move on to me essentially accomplishing a dream I had had for a little while. Getting into the ability to plan and host or co-host my own night photo shoots, most of which at the Illinois Railway Museum. My good friend Logan featured in the last slide passed this along around Thanksgiving time in 2021. And this is the pitch for the Nevada Northern Railway's Young Photographer Scholarship. They call it Steam, Steel, and Strobes. And it was basically an opportunity for young adults to submit 3 images, write a short essay, and win admission to the Nevada Northern Railway's winter photo shoot. So, thinking not much of it, I submitted these 3 images in an essay for the contest, and as an early Christmas gift, I got this wonderful email from the president, Mark Bassett, that I was a runner-up winner of the contest. Each year, there are 2 grand prize winners of the scholarship and 2 runner-up winners. Each have a different cash award. The grand prize winner, your hotel nights are paid for, and you get to come out to the railroad. You spend 3 days on the railroad photographing their beautiful 280 steam engines. They have the 460 number 40 undergoing a 1472 currently. The number 81, which is on the left in this image, is undergoing a little bit of help work-wise. And the 93 has been the regular locomotive working for the past couple of years. They do wonderful stage scenes where they, first thing in the morning, they back the locomotives or run them out of the shop together, side by side on converging tracks. So you get that beautiful steam if it's cold out, and we were lucky with the sun here on this day. And since this weekend, I don't think both steam engines have run much side by side. Countless opportunities for a photographer to step back in time on an all-original railroad. It's like the East Broad Top, but I think it's a notch up from the East Broad Top. That's my opinion. Part of the pitch from the railroad for the scholarship opportunity is you get to work with Steve Crease. Well-known photographer. If you've heard his name before, you understand that he's kind of a big deal. If you haven't, you've seen his work and not known it. He has done some album covers for some pretty famous people, and he's one of the guys who was able to photograph Rod Stewart's layouts. So like I said, part of the pitch is he's there not to hold your hand, but to show you different things when you're there. He'll help you with the night shoot. There's a night shoot 1 day out of the 3 days, which is great. And he would end up spending many minutes with me on the phone giving advice on how you run shoots safely and lighting strategy and all this and that. So additionally, aside him is Ben, who's a good guy, largely taken over with the lighting for the night shoots at Nevada Northern, with a lot of influencing by Steve, but also spent a decent amount of time talking with me and sharing new ideas with me. It's my opinion that out of all the guys across the country providing lighting for night photo shoots at different organizations and railroads, that these guys are the best. They have backgrounds in studio photography, which gives them the ability to exercise that experience and background on the railroad. And the railroad gives them especially carte blanche to try different ideas and different scenes. This is obviously in their engine house where we did the night photo shoot one night. The more I look at this, it still blows my mind. I still use it as a reference today for my own stuff, just with the character, the actors, and the colors of the lighting, which I'll talk about a little bit. And the way there's a lot of inherent drama. One of my all-time favorites, I just wish I lit it myself. Picking up where we left off at the Illinois Railway Museum, like I said, I had made a nice amount of friends and was allowed to stage small impromptu shoots. This is in the back of the Nebraska Zephyr, and was gaining some credibility from, the guys like the superintendent. In the conductor uniform, that's the president at the time, Larry Stone. On the right, that's my good friend Matt, who we saw before, and other buddy Charlie and his wife Lucy on the left, posing for a picture. What I really wanted to do was run my own night photo sessions at the museum and bring forth special opportunities for photographers and guests to photograph IRM's equipment, doing things you wouldn't normally see IRM equipment doing. It's kind of like other photo shoots. The pitches, you make the trains, you set them up to do things and be places where they wouldn't be on a normal day. There were already, at the time, a couple other guys who had done some IRM shoots, were bringing their lights, and were working with the diesel department and some other departments within. But nobody had really done a steam department photo shoot. So I came up with a plan to do a shoot in the fall of 2022 with 1630. And gained a lot of support from museum volunteers willing to give it a shot with me. So this was the first scene of the first shoot that I put together. I led the charge on bouncing ideas off people and got the okay. First thing I want to mention when I go into this is these shoots are impossible without the cooperation and incredible help from other museum volunteers, the engine crew, and operations guys, conductors. It takes a lot of guys to put these together, and I'm glad they've let me kind of say, okay, we should try this and we should do this time. So this was in October of 22. And we sold out. We posted tickets on, we made the pitch on social media, and all the tickets sold out. I can't remember how fast it took, but that was good that we had gained some interest. The lighting here was provided by Rob Schreiner, who was helping the diesel department with some of their recent photo shoots at IRM. Fundamentally, simple lighting setup with, we hadn't gotten to the backlighting thing or any of that other fancy stuff that I talked about earlier, but we'll get there. So this turned out to be kind of one of the coolest pictures, at least I have from IRM, and maybe, one of the top that have ever been done in a shoot at the museum. This was tied to the 70 for 70 event, which was 2 years ago was the 70th anniversary of the museum, and they made 70 pieces of electric equipment run in a parade. And this was the next day. So we have the North Shore Electroliner passing the Chicago North Shore and Milwaukee line car. with a number of workers on top, actually touching 700 volts DC. For the first couple shoots that I had kind of masterminded, we used Rob's Alien Bees, and guests would bring their tripods, and they'd do a kind of a long exposure, a second or two or three. And we would make the flashes go pop. While the shutters were open, we would count down 3, 2, 1. And what we found is that it worked, but didn't yield as much photography as other options, which I will explain also later. This one, maybe I like the previous one a little better because it's matched, but equally as cool. We've had the opportunity to do some pretty cool scenes with some pretty cool pieces of equipment. The South Shore 800, has run twice in the past 15 years. And the Electroliner is undergoing a pretty lengthy restoration, but it can move itself around. The interior just needs some work. One of the coolest parts about running these shoots has been getting my friends and sometimes even my family to help out, dressing up as actors, showing up with props, dressing for the era. Here you see we have lanterns and guys in overalls doing whatever all over 2 steam engines. I was on the radio with both steam engineers, telling them exactly when to blow down, which is how they made the steam effect for both engines. The wind was blowing a certain way, so I would tell one to blow down and the other to stop, or the other to keep going, or what have you. Here I had decided that with the steam locomotives, subjects with a lot of detail, steam, actors, bring it to the next level. So we did the backlighting thing. So we pointed, we resisted the urge to put the key light behind us, and simply set light in across the subjects from a couple of different angles, or raked it across. And here you could see all the valve gear on the Shay, all of the valve gear on 1630, the fronts of the locomotives, and there's shadow and drama. Another one of my all-time favorites, this is my friend Joey, who was the fireman that night. We did the second steam photo shoot, so now we have a couple pictures from the second steam shoot that I did in 23. I added a single light behind Joey in the coal bunker, and you can tell that the rest of, you see the light on the cab wall behind him and the light coming from the firebox, but my opinion, the light that really made the image was the light behind him, which you would maybe think should be there. Or you wouldn't look at this image and say, oh, that light is artificial, but it fits in here. So that's another thing you want to go for. You want to blend it and make it look sort of organic. Here's a picture of the photo line where we had a couple of different scenes set up at once, so people, rather than everybody's in a big photo line and we're all shooting at the same time, we set up a couple of small things. You see the steps up to the engine, which is what I just did with Joey, and people are taking pictures of the whole the front of the locomotive as well. With steam, it's almost like there's this expectation of timelessness, and there's this idea of nostalgia, a bygone era where we can't enjoy the sound of the chuffing and the whistle. But you want to take it to a level where the image takes you back to an era where people my age never saw, in terms of revenue or regular trains, but maybe a different generation remembers that. Here we've done the classic hooping up of train orders from the operator on the ground up to the engineer. I mentioned that in 2022, I was a runner-up winner for the Nevada Northern Scholarship. I applied again to be grand prize winner in 2023, but missed out. But in 2024, I was lucky enough to be a grand prize winner, which was the end goal from the get-go. And this is a picture by Steve Crease. You see me on the lower left. On the upper left is Trevor Roast, and he is the June speaker, I believe, at Cincinnati Railroad Club, along with two other extremely talented photographers, Jonah Collins up top on the right, and Nick Stewart on the bottom. A couple of winners from the 3-day shoot. Last year, 2024, terrific time to hang with rail fans, but also photographers of different subjects. Well, you get guys and women who photograph things like birds, wildlife, or what have you, all sorts of different subjects. They say, well, I want to try something different. I want to shoot trains. So it's really good to be able to talk to people with different backgrounds and see their perspective on the same thing. There's this rail fan thing about the 3/4, and some guys, many guys take that to the next level, but it's good to be inspired by people who are from a completely different background and do things other than trains. So by this point in time, I had run 3 different shoots at IRM and had learned the basics of how you give a safety meeting and tell people not to trip, how you lead a group, and how you light things in terms of where you put the lights. One important thing that sets the Nevada Northern shoots with the lighting by Ben and Steve apart from most others is their use of altering the color temperature of the lights, which is going to segue into the third theme of the presentation, color temperature. So for those of you who are kind of unfamiliar with what's going on, basically we're changing the temperature or the look and the color of the source of light. So instead of just white light, I've said, well, now we can mimic light from a building, or we can match it with an incandescent or a lantern. Whereas if we cool a light source, it's like moonlight or some celestial, it's coming from the night sky, it matches with the darkness in the background of the night sky. And we have some existing light here. So it's cool to have some areas warm, some cool. You can do it subtle, you can do it very dramatic, where the color temperatures are very separate. And this is a very subtle example. On the top we have Zach Ellers, and in the cab of the line car we have Greg Wolfersheim, 2 IRM volunteers, as well as Bill Halstead on the platform. A fun fact about this shot: this is the Illinois Terminal line car, fresh out of restoration last year at the Illinois Railway Museum. And Bill Halstead's dad worked for the Illinois Terminal on this car and was part of the crew that took down the wire at the end of the railroad. Very cool connection. So this image, at least to me, is a little bit more powerful because of that. Another subtle but noticeable example of changing the light. So I had a light source down toward the end of the car, the far end of the car, that was bluish. So maybe it's a moonlighty thing. And same with to my left, there's a blue light over there. But over my right shoulder, there's this warm light. Maybe it's kind of a structure from a building. It just adds a different layer to this image. You can see the blue and the reflection off the end of the car and off the window panes in the white, and in the silver you can see how it's kind of blue. Another a good old movie trick, not extremely visible in this particular example, but you wet the pavement. Looks like it just rained. It adds to the night thing. Very, very cool temp-wise. Makes it feel like night, not necessarily look like night. I added a couple of lights behind this locomotive and, behind it, aimed at the building, just to make it feel like the moon's coming from up top and to the right in the sky. But there's still a light behind me to the left on the nose. This shot was okay. This was about a year and a half ago, but only one locomotive. I had heard recently that they moved the other engine that this elevator has right next door, so I went back and did it again. Now, this is one of those where between the two, I haven't decided which one I like more. So did I go a step forward or a step backward with the one versus the one with the two locomotives? For you rail fans and aficionados, yes, vintage Sioux line, still in their IMRL patch jobs and the white and red paint schemes. So this is at the one of the far ends of one of the barns at the Illinois Railway Museum. And one of the points I took away from Steve and Ben with the color temperature thing, again, is that while you're lighting areas that maybe aren't supposed to be lit or aren't actually lit, how do you make them sort of cinematically look how you would want it to look if you were trying to get that feeling out of it? So it feels like night. It doesn't really look like this at night, but it feels like night. We had a fog machine. Neither of these engines run. We had a fog machine set up at the end of the barn, and I used LEDs with color temperature changing gels to change the color temperatures of the lights all around the scene, in front of the engines and between the engines. Like I alluded to before and got into a little bit, so with the shoots where people were bringing their tripods and opening their shutter when we counted down with the flashes, it was tough for people who had not experienced that type of shoot before, came from a different background, and especially people who maybe showed up with their phone or did not know their way around their camera or didn't bring a tripod. It's like, oh man. You try to pitch it to people, at least we tried to before. It's super important that you bring a tripod. And it's super important that you have a camera on which you can alter the shutter speed, ISO, aperture, all of that. It just didn't always work out. So what I decided was, since Rob was generous enough to show up with his alien bees and I could kind of choose where to put them, I was going to start collecting lights, and I chose to collect constantly lit LED lights that are basically just movie lights, which stay lit. They're not strobes at all. They're LEDs on a panel about 6 inches wide by 5 inches wide. And on them, you can change the color temperature a little bit. You can also add gels. And this type of lighting satisfied more people, and people had a better time shooting at the shoots where I've done this. They took more pictures. they were able to continuously shoot. Maybe the steam looked better in this frame and not the last frame or whatever. So using the constant LEDs along with the color temperature changing gels, very well received in the last shoot. This one was in September. And the engine on the right is also not operational at all. We use the same smoke machine. We were lucky enough to have the wind in our favor. Just by show of hands, did I fool anybody? Anybody think they were both online? All right. So mission accomplished. Very good. Here's another one where you'd expect, like, there's these two guys, it's the middle of the night, and they're looking out at God knows what. It's actually just me with my silly camera asking them to smile. But this ambient light is very bluish, very moonlightish. And Blake, the fireman on the left, is holding a lantern. And then the cab light, the very warm incandescent cab light, is bleeding through from inside the cab. And I don't know if you can really see it lit, but my good buddy Andrew in the engineer seat is holding a stogie. Another somewhat subtle example. In my mind, we had the depot off to the left, which was providing some existing light, so I complemented that with warm, but then I added the cool light off the nose. So maybe there's moonlight to my left or my right, but actually no light except for just the moon. And, so it gets more philosophical and almost cinematic as opposed to just light. What I discovered as I was noticing how I can improve my shoots by adding different color temperatures, I was noticing different color temperatures in existing light, which I thought was interesting in terms of adding dimension. It just how you edit a photo. You might edit it a certain way because now you have this light of this white balance, but you wanted this one to be more prominent. Anyway, this is the first picture of one of my new favorite spots. Been going there a long time, but now especially a favorite spot near Chicago and not far from my house at all, Franklin Park. So this image is handheld with a mirrorless camera and what we call a fast lens, a lens that takes in an awful lot of light super quick, for those of you not familiar with photography. So I wondered, I was seeing some other people do this, but I wondered, could I get away with using my new mirrorless camera and a very fast lens and only existing light for moving trains, as opposed to getting out all the flashes, making sure they all work, bringing the batteries for the triggers, testing them, having to replace the batteries in 1, then 2, then 3, and then having to make all these changes because there's all these test shots. Well, it turned out it pretty much has worked, which for me has been extremely groundbreaking, and groundbreaking for many others. And I'm going to get into what each of those terms mean in a moment for those of you who maybe aren't as familiar with photography. A mirrorless camera basically refers to the latest and greatest in technology from your big camera companies, Sony and Canon and Nikon. There's no shutter. It's all digital. But it just so happens that it's that removal of the shutter and going all digital has come with the latest advancements in the technology of the camera. They can soak up a lot of light very quickly. They see a lot of detail. They are sharp. They are good at focusing on subjects that are moving quick or in very bland areas of light without contrast. Like I said before, we saw Franklin Park. This is at the depot in Franklin Park, which you may have seen pictures of this location for Franklin Park Railroad Days, an annual event, kind of a big deal for Chicago rail fans. And I like this spot so much is because trains go slow. The station lighting is strong, recently all replaced with LEDs. And there is plenty of good action from the CPKC after the merger with the CP and the KCS. And they are going into Bensonville Yard, which is right behind me in the picture here. Right around this time, this is late 2023, I had the mirrorless camera, my Z6 II, and I bought a 50 millimeter f1.8 prime lens, which prime lens is, with the exception of portrait photography, railfan photography, not super common nowadays. There's these zoom lenses where you can zoom in and out, and most railfans seem to like those. The 50 millimeter f1.8 allows me to shoot in scenarios with very, very limited existing light, and it exposes the image much quicker than some of those other lenses. Here's an example of a very low light image. I learned very quickly to take advantage of every little bit of existing light and account for how much each light source would affect the train as it enters the scene. Another great thing about this method of photography is it wasn't one and done like with the strobes. My camera shoots 14 frames a second. I can shoot at night with existing light at 14 frames per second now. If the train is moving slow enough, you can pretty much get away with anything. This is a Chicago PCC car on the loop at IRM. He's going pretty slow, and there's not much light here, but it was enough. Also working for me here, the fog adds drama. So when I figured out this thing where, okay, I have this good camera and now my images are being taken with a reasonably fast shutter speed. So I'm freezing the subject. There's still a bit of grain going on. There's this new thing. And for those of you familiar with Photoshop, everybody's heard of Photoshop. The little brother of Photoshop is called Lightroom. It's where you edit pictures, you mess with color, the brightness, the shadows, the contrast, the texture. You can make little changes, but it's basically the light room. Anything related to light, changing backgrounds and other alterations, those are all done in Photoshop. But in Lightroom, they have this new tool called denoise. And denoise, removal of noise or grain, is powered by AI. And it uses AI to draw back detail lost in high grain photographs. So pictures where the noise is out of control and you wouldn't be able to make out one thing or another. I was able to get images exposed enough where the train was frozen enough with just a low enough amount of grain that the denoise would wipe the grain. This picture is a moving train at night and started its life in the camera as pretty grainy, and now it's not grainy because the AI denoise saved the day. So I was going to Franklin Park pretty frequently all of a sudden because I loved the low light. I figured out when some other cool trains ran, we saw the picture of the SD40-2s coming in. We saw the Sioux Line locomotive that was in the area for a little bit too. So I would go after work nights and just hang out and hope a train would pop. This local leaves 3 days a week, and they use the caboose as a shoving platform. So that's also a point of interest. I was going so often and trying so many angles at Franklin Park that I almost felt like I was getting ready for something big, like rehearsing for something. So last year, the CPKC CP 2816, a gorgeous Hudson, did the final spike tour all the way from Canada into Mexico and back. And along the way, they stopped in Franklin Park. Well, when they stopped at Franklin Park late in the day, and they had the train facing east, but needed to go west the next morning. So when they came in the wrong way, I said, well, wait a minute, that's not right. They're going to have to turn the train. Wait a minute, that means they have to turn the train after the sun goes down. That meant that the train was pretty much going to do its first, at least from what I saw, its first running at all at night on the whole tour, which, night guy, pretty exciting. So, all the pieces were kind of falling into place that the train had to go and get turned and come back through Franklin Park later that night, and that is when I took this picture. So I debated using strobes, which is what everybody else there did. They set it up so that they would have the locomotive going under the signal bridge with the signals and whatever. And I thought, well, that's a lot of work. And I wasn't sure it was going to come out. And I didn't really want to risk missing the train. Or one strobe not working and then the shot's just gone. It was not worth it. And me being very disappointed. So I had done this shot with Metro trains, but really wanted to try it with the steam engine. What I did here, I set up my movie lights way down after the grade crossing, pointed back almost about 45 degrees off the side of the engine, and then it would reflect toward the camera in an attempt to backlight and get some extra detail out of the locomotive. I wasn't worried so much about the rest of the train, how that would show up. I knew that I had the grade crossing lights going in my favor. I had not taken into consideration the lights from the signal bridge. That worked out marvelously with the smoke out of the smokestack. This guy was moving fast. He was really moving quite quick through Franklin Park. This is something that might make no sense to some people, but for those of you who are into photography and get the whole, digital thing or film thing, what I want to point out to you is the ISO, 8,000 ISO. And the denoise made it all go away. And look at that shutter speed, 3/20th of a second. That's pretty fast. And I remember quickening the shutter speed, making it faster because I saw the train was going quick. You have to keep in mind when not using strobes, the train obviously is moving, and if you're using a slower shutter speed at night, you might get motion blur. In a 3/20th of a second, a 30-mile-an-hour train is moving 1.65 inches. Fun, useless fact for the day. Somewhat useful for me. I can work at an angle that allows me to get minimal motion blur. This is what I see in Lightroom. You can choose how much AI is used. The more you use, the more goofy the picture looks because it starts to draw back things that it really has no idea how to draw back. Like railheads, or how turnouts converge, or logos of complex things like the Kansas City Southern logo. It has no idea what that looks like. It all is like an oil painting. So you have to use it in some moderation and use other means of fighting the grain, which is the menu option on the left. In this particular image, we have some blue hour. We had some requests for blue hour. And if not for the street lights near the crossing, the dusk sky would have blown out the background. So we have the street lights working in my favor, and maybe a car headlight waiting at the crossing. Same as the last shot, use the crossing lights and car headlights. Barely enough light, and the train was moving just slow enough to make this one work after fighting it with the AI-powered denoise. This one is fun, more so in terms of a Railfan event. Freight Power doesn't usually go on this line into downtown Chicago, and one night I was tipped off that they were going to be bringing a 96-car loaded ballast train into city limits on the Northwest line. And this is Clybourne, the last station before downtown Chicago. And those searchlights, yes, are still there. So this is pretty cool. Extremely unusual to see that kind of locomotive and that kind of train in this part of the city. Canal Street is right outside of Union Station on the north end, so you get a bunch of Metra and a handful of Amtrak. When you have city scenes where there's all kinds of existing light, that totally works in this era. I can stand there all day, not have to get a single light out of my car, not have to test a single thing. All I have to do is take the picture. I can take 40, 50, 100 pictures of the same train and pick the one I want. Run it through the denoise later, and boom. Nice to have a train where it goes by and then it goes by 20 other times. So this is the Kenosha streetcar loop in Kenosha, Wisconsin. These guys own and operate 5 or 6 different PCC cars painted up for different streetcar schemes from all around North America. Really, really cool. And I think they run most days. The train's going slow enough, even one solid light source. The white light coming from the left is enough, and then the crossing lights definitely helped here as well. This is an Iowa Northern train going slow. He had actually stopped right before the crossing, and he's just getting going and leaving the yard. Opportunity well taken at freezing a train going slow, and knowing when to really crank the ISO and really risk the picture looking pretty wonky and grainy. This one turned out pretty well. On the contrary, kind of like the Metro shot, downtown-ish area with a lot of different existing light sources. This is the train less than a mile later, same train as the last side. And this is the Iowa Northern. In case I didn't point that out, this was, I can't remember the date, February 2nd, so about a month ago. Last week of operations under their own name before they were taken over by Canadian National, a week later. So power hasn't changed, but now operated by Canadian National. This is going to be the final shot of the section and the show in one of the more recent favorite spots that we've seen, a couple shots from Franklin Park. And funny story about this one, a potash train was coming in off the Indiana Harbor Belt and spilled a bunch of potash along the right-of-way. Well, I am not a railroader, but as I understand it, that is very bad. and screws up the signaling and can trigger signal malfunctions and grade crossing malfunctions. It falsely trips the signals. So they had, in order to get out and flag and protect every crossing through downtown Franklin Park. So this is the conductor on the nightly local from the UP to the CPKC. And he had just dropped a flare. That's where we got the dramatic smoke effect in front of the locomotive. And with that, folks, that is the end of the show.
Thank you so much for watching tonight's presentation. To learn more about the Cincinnati Railroad Club and to become a member and check out our blog, visit our website, cincinnati.rrclub.org. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more programs like this.